When I first heard about rock steady boxing, the first thing I thought about was, let me see if I can advance these slides. Oh, can you advance the slides, please? Oh. See, this is what I thought about. I thought, oh my gosh, boxing for Parkinson's, that is not going to be good. But let me tell you that on the next slide, I'm sorry, there's no clicker up here, that it's non-contact boxing. All right, they do everything a boxer does. They do all the types of training that a boxer would traditionally do to get ready for a bout, but they're not sparring. They're not hitting each other. That would be counterintuitive for a diseased brain. So the question then is, why boxing for Parkinson's disease? So I thought what I would start at with this conference, because I know there's other researchers in the room, is let's start with some hard-hitting evidence from an ESPN poll. And so they did a poll a few years ago where they asked sportscasters and coaches and athletes how they wanted to know what the most difficult sport was. So they looked across 10 different characteristics of sport, like power and strength and agility and flexibility, and asked them based on all these sports, what's the difficulty ranking of this sport? And lo and behold, boxing came out on top, and fishing was at the bottom. But with boxing, so these boxers, when they train, they have to be able to withstand 3 minutes of very intense exercise in a bout to basically fight for themselves. And that's what rock steady is based on. It's based on those principles. So it's not just a one type of exercise where they're just focusing on strengthening or balance. They're working on all sorts of different characteristics that are encompassed in exercise. And I think that's what's great about Parkinson's, because Parkinson's isn't just about shaking or the tremors or the stooped posture. They have so many things going on with them. And so this kind of exercise approach that's very eclectic is what makes it so interesting and really got me interested in it. But the first thing I thought about was, is it safe? And is it feasible? That's my PT hat, right? So I wanted to determine if it was safe and feasible, and then I wanted to look at the impacts on function. So we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the evidence. So we'll go ahead and advance the slides, please. I don't have a clicker, And the next one, thank you. All right, so the first study that we did, on the next slide, please, is that of a case series that we did, where we looked at just a handful of people with Parkinson's disease that were new to boxing at Rocksteady, and we wanted to determine what do they look like over a 9-month period of time. Please advance to the next slide. And so we had 6 folks in this study, and we just wanted to determine, is it safe? So do they have any injuries? Do they can they attend the classes? And everybody was fine. There was no injuries during the time that they were participating. They were able to participate in the classes. They were able to do all the types of things the coaches were asking them to do, and they were getting better over time. And when I was in PT school 20 plus years ago, we were told Parkinson's is a progressive disorder. The best thing you could do for them is give them a walker and help them to be able to get around their house. They're just going to get worse. But this was not the case. These folks were continually getting better over that entire 9 months period of time that we were studying them, which is phenomenal, and we've seen that in multiple studies done by physical therapists that we can improve function in people with Parkinson's disease. The other thing that we thought that was really interesting is that 5 of the 6 people in this case series stuck with Rocksteady. After the study was over, they kept wanting to go back. They loved it. They said they enjoyed the camaraderie, and they wanted to keep participating, which we don't typically see in exercise, even in healthy people. It's hard for us to get out there and keep exercising every day, and it's even harder for people with Parkinson's disease to keep going. So the next study we did, on the next slide, is we looked at just a pilot randomized trial. And if you could advance the slides, please. And we just wanted to compare traditional boxing or traditional exercise to boxing. And so we had groups doing randomized into both of those groups. And it wasn't really powered to be able to show differences. What we found in that study is that there were some really interesting things happening. Is the people that were involved in the boxing training were getting better with their walking function and with particularly with their walking endurance. So it's something about the fitness aspect of the boxing program that was helping them to improve their endurance over time. So then on the next slide, the next study we did was a longitudinal study where we wanted to follow people with Parkinson's disease over a 2-year period of time. We recruited 88 people around central Indiana, and we followed them every 6 months doing a host of different types of functional outcome measures. And we had enough people from Rocksteady, about half of our sample participated at Rocksteady, and the other half was really doing other types of traditional exercise, more lower intensity type, basic type exercise programs that the YMCA and other just Parkinson's exercise groups. So the blue line indicates the boxers. And what was really interesting about following these folks over 2 years is that while both groups and all these folks were exercising, they maintained their function. There was no difference in severity of these two groups, but the boxers maintained a higher level of function over time. So this shows walking speed. They walked at a faster speed and maintained that for a 2-year period of time. And the walking speed of the boxers matched that of what we know to be normal for healthy counterparts, which was pretty amazing for people with Parkinson's disease. And then on the next slide, that shows reaching. We were interested in reaching because they have to reach forward to punch the targets. We found the same thing. The boxers are reaching further and maintaining that over that 2-year period of time. And then on the next slide is balance confidence. So we wanted to know how confident are you in your balance, that you're not going to fall. We found the same thing, that over that 2-year period of time, the boxers were telling us they had more confidence in their balance, and we're basically not falling and feeling that they could do more things around their home and in their community. And then the last one, the next slide, is their quality of life, their perception of their quality of life. Now this looks opposite, but this scale, the Parkinson's Disease Questionnaire, actually a lower score indicates a better perception of quality of life. And here we see that the blue line with the boxers, they were telling us over that 2-year period of time that they perceived their quality of life was better. And they, again, keep in mind, they had the same severity and they were exercising just like the other group, but it was something about this boxing program that was, giving them a better perception of their quality of life. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. So the question for me as a researcher and a physical therapist was, is it the fact they're putting on boxing gloves and they're hitting these targets? I mean, let's face it, we'd all feel better if we hit something sometime. So it could be that. But I wasn't quite sure from an exercise perspective if that was really the case. So we've done some further analysis, and we looked at not just the type of exercise, but the amount of exercise, the fact that they're exercising on a consistent basis, or is it the intensity of their exercise? So Rocksteady is what I would consider a high-intensity interval training program. They're exercising at a much higher level. It's sort of like CrossFit, if anyone's familiar with CrossFit. And so it's pretty phenomenal just that people with Parkinson's disease are able to handle this. So we did this analysis, if you could click it one more, what we found was intensity was the only exercise characteristic that significantly predicted all of these, that better function, better walking speed, better balance confidence, better quality of life. So it may not just be the fact they're putting on the boxing gloves, but again, it goes back to that type of exercise. It's that eclectic, that high-intensity exercise program that they're doing on a regular basis. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. So we've just finished up this study where we looked at cardiorespiratory fitness. So we've put folks on a treadmill, we measured their oxygen intake, and we looked at people that did Rocksteady, so those were our high-intensity exercisers. We looked at other people with Parkinson's who did moderate to low-intensity exercisers, and then we looked at healthy counterparts that were age-matched to that group. And what we know from the evidence is that people with Parkinson's, they have a different consumption of oxygen when they exercise. They don't do as well. They're not as efficient, and they fatigue much more quickly. But what we found were all of our exercisers were similar to our healthy counterparts that were also exercising. So that's a good thing. We know that if you exercise and you have Parkinson's, you can improve your fitness level and not fatigue as easily. But what we found was our high-intensity exercisers, which were our boxers, were significantly better than the moderate exercisers. So there's certainly something about that high-intensity program that's driving these folks to have better fitness levels. And then another slide. We asked all the folks in the study, how high do you perceive your intensity when you exercise, and there was a significant difference. So the boxers were all telling us that they were at this maximal high intensity level when they were exercising, almost to the point where if you go for a really long run and you run really hard, you're like, oh, you're just really having a hard time forcing yourself to keep going. That's at the level that they get to. This was different, significantly different than the people that were working out at a more moderate level, and also the folks that were healthy. They weren't even exercising as intensely. So we think that there may be something about the intensity may be actually the key ingredient to this exercise program that's leading to these functional changes, the ability for these folks to maintain these higher levels of function over time. So we're going to continue to look at this over the next few years and look at changes within the brain as well as functional changes. So I just have another comment on the next slide, and that is, what does this mean to us? Many of us are in healthcare, and this is a community program. They're doing their own thing. And I just really wanted to say that I think that it's important for those of us in the traditional healthcare setting to really support these long-term solutions. I've been a physical therapist for over 20 years, and we see people just for short periods of time and send them on their way with their home exercise program and say, have a nice life. But that's not, this is a long-term disease. This is lifelong. And so we need to build partnerships with programs like Rock Steady Boxing and support them in the work that they're doing. And one of the things that I feel really lucky to be a part of is we've partnered with Community Health Network, Body One Physical Therapy, and also those of us at UIndy to do free screening programs for the boxers at Rock Steady. So every other month we set up basically a PT clinic in their gym, and we screen their boxers. They come in with health complaints like knee pain, back pain, their difficulty with their balance, changes in maybe their cognition that they sense, and we screen them, and we give them either exercises that we think that they need to do to strengthen what might be weak. We will adapt their boxing exercises, or we'll refer them to the appropriate healthcare professional that they need. And what's exciting about this is when just looking at the retention rate, one more click, is we've had a 98% retention rate of those boxers we've screened staying in the boxing program. And that's the most important thing here, is that we keep them exercising, we keep them healthy. I tell my patients with Parkinson's disease, exercise is probably just as important as taking your medication, your Cinemet every day. They need to stay. There's just growing amounts of evidence for the efficacy of exercise for people with Parkinson's disease. So we need to work with programs like Rock Steady to keep people active over time. All right, that's what I have for you, and thank you very much.